Everybody, thank you for joining us. We have Jillian Manus here of Structure Capital, and she's going to be telling us a little bit about branding tips, alternative funding options. And with that, I guess, Hall, I'll let you take it from here. And everybody, if you have any questions, please just drop them in the chat box and we'll field them out and ask Jillian for you. All right, Hall.
Great. Thanks, Shane. And Jillian, thank you for joining us today. Looking forward to our discussion here. And for those in the audience, like I say, it's very interactive. So give us your questions as we go forward. So Jillian, let's kick off and tell us more about your background. What did you do before you got to Structure Capital?
Yeah, pretty much did everything, actually. I was a director of development for Warner Brothers and Universal Studios. I was associate publisher of 2 national magazines, one that tracked the financial strategies of the technology industry. I was an early investor in technology in the night. I'm going to date myself here, but late 1980s, where I was investing in startups such, as Applied Materials and Oracle and Sun Microsystems, and investing into Hope, which is what Esther Dyson called biotech at the time. I'm a Dean's Fellow at the Stanford Medical School. I sit on the digital health board there. I'm advisor to a number of healthcare systems. And so subsequently, I've had sort of a very eclectic background. But if you push me all the way back, I was co-director of TMT at Credit Suisse in Zurich. So I started in banking and then moved to everything under the sun, which is actually why I think that I like and really feel very confident being a venture capitalist, because I've invested, I've ran companies, I've built 4 companies of my own. I've sold 3 of them and completely imploded one of them. All my fault.
Well, great. That's quite a journey, quite a history there. Thanks for sharing that with us. So what led you to the architects of the zero waste economy? What brought you to that place and that subject?
Yeah, well, I have a very interesting answer for that on a personal level as well as a professional level. On a personal level, I actually was homeless at a time in my life and living on the street. We learned how to do better with what we have. Not all homeless people are drug addicts. They're not all crazy. They are people that fell on hard times. And I was in a domestic abuse situation that ended me up on the street, which in retrospect is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And I still work a lot with homeless people, unsheltered. Doing better with what we have, zero waste. That's not a choice on the street. Zero waste. You have to do better with whatever you have. Fast forward that a little bit to work I did with Cuba. Cuba, I wrote a paper on and called it the first sharing economy. And for all of those who even understand the Cuba economy, and they don't have anything coming in, nor going out. There's no import export there. They have to repurpose everything they have, from carburetors to baby clothes. And so it is a very interesting, I built a business model for the Cuban government. That's another whole story. And worked with them and the Church of Cuba to build a startup program called Cuba Emprende. How we do better with what we have is a mentality that extends from the street, from working with the first sharing economy and a soul sharing economy, to just working in clean tech in terms of zero waste energy, and subsequently just a whole philosophy around our fund in terms of what is and what is zero waste? Is it zero waste space? Is it like peer space? Is it zero waste in a car such as Uber? These are all some of our companies. Cargomatic, zero waste in a truck, cargo, zero waste in human potential. That's another way we look at the zero waste.
Great. And so what is the impact of underutilized assets and excess capacity? What's the real impact there?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are realizing, and especially during the pandemic, but even now more so, is that the supply chain for a lot of products has been completely disrupted. And our ability to somehow find resilience in our products, but enabling us to source from different countries is now more than ever part of the critical demand. If in fact we are able to repurpose and utilize what we have better, and by even, dismantling them to use the parts better, I think that we're going to be able to become much more self-reliant as a country, actually, not just companies.
Great. So we had a quick question. What about, why was Cuba AutoArctic? Why is that?
Now that's a big question, and I was working with them a long time ago, and certainly this will take us in a political direction, which I'm not quite sure I'm ready to address. But if someone wants to reach out to me and talk to me, I was really working with the church there in order to help them invest in the entrepreneurs in Cuba and help them utilize their technology better. And so it was really trying to understand this society of this sharing economy and how better I could serve them and how they could teach me. And I think we learn globally from other countries. It's important for us to look through their lens and for them to inform us, not for us to just inform them.
Great. So tell us about your fund. What exactly is the investment thesis behind it?
Yeah, the investment thesis, just as stated, we are invested in underutilized assets and excess capacity. So if I were to give you some, that is zero waste economy, that represents a very big, of a category. But it's everything from a company, a life science company out of MIT called LiquiGlide. It is an algorithm that changes the molecular structure of high viscosity liquids to create a zero barrier surface. And basically what it is it changes the compositions of high viscosity liquid, creating a zero stick surface, thereby within manufacturing, within the CPG, consumer packaged goods, 100% will come out of a package, any package, without needing FDA approval, because it's the same composition as the liquid itself. It is just mechanically, it's engineered a different way. We are able to reduce wastewater in manufacturing vats and holding tanks, because 100% or close to 100% slides out without needing the water to clean out the tanks between batches. That's zero waste. But then if you juxtapose that to, let's say, Cargomatic, which is a logistics platform for trucking, it is really the last mile trucking. And how do we fill up the cargo spaces and optimize that so that that's where the company began. That's where it started. So that's zero waste. To, once again, Sonder is one of our companies, PeerSpace is one of our companies, Breather is one of our companies. How do we use space better? How do we monetize? How do we optimize? Instead of just building, and what can we do that serves society better? I always talk about the 21st century business model, which is in fact not just creating a return to shareholders, but creating a return to society. And that's really very top of mind for Structure Capital.
And so what do you tell startups in this space? What's your advice for them in running a business in this new model and in this area of zero waste?
Want to repeat that?
What's your advice for startups that are in the zero waste economy? What do you coach them to do?
Yeah. Zero waste, as I noted, one of the biggest problems I see that companies have, not just in zero waste, but across the board, is that they land on a solution without really understanding the problem. And they seem to chase the solution and not really understand how to build to the problem. And I see this time and time again, where companies or have their mission, and they're driven by a zero waste mission, but they're not really understanding how to plug into a larger framework of regulatory and policy issues that seem to be one of the biggest challenges when we talk about the zero waste economy.
Well, are there special challenges in the zero waste economy? Regulatory seems to be a big factor, but what do you think is the biggest challenge they face?
Well, unfortunately, we are, our country is being pulled apart, drawn and quartered. I actually think that's a good analogy. It's not just two parties, it's extremists that are challenging companies every day in terms of picking sides. And if you sit in a mission that you truly believe in, I believe that you can actually change the current of policy. We've seen that with the sharing economy time and time again, certainly with transportation. My husband stepped down recently as general counsel of Airbnb, Rob Chestnut, and we saw how Airbnb really changed policy, really pushed back. And I think that as long as a company has that strength and that understanding that this is not going to be an easy road, and that there are going to be a constant change of policies with every administration, both locally as well as nationally, I think that's something that companies need to be very mindful about in the front, not just as they build.
So what is the challenge investors face in the zero waste economy? What's unique to this space that they don't see elsewhere?
Yeah, venture has taken on an entirely, I think, different persona in the last, I would say, even 3 to 4 years. There are many people who are setting themselves up as venture funds, which actually is wonderful. And I'd like to see more women and minorities do so. And I am a big advocate, and I invest in that area. But I think that venture funds are now starting to understand that there is a lot more around mission and values, not just valuations, that a fund has to invest in. And so I think the dynamics of venture capital has been changing and has been being educated by founders, and even more so being educated by society, by their customers, who are demanding more around values, around core values, around leadership, taking a firm sort of stand on certain societal issues. And so I think venture capitalists have a wonderful opportunity now to become leaders, as do CEOs of these companies. And we're seeing that more and more.
Great. Well, a question from the audience is, love to hear how you rediscovered yourself from coming back from the abused homeless place. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is actually, if you want to, I mean, this is so core to building and rebuilding a company as you rebuild a person. So I actually was in a homeless shelter down in the Bowery in New York City. I didn't have anything. And I didn't have my voice as well. It's a longer story, but in that specific, I was in 16 hot shelters during that year and a half. And the last one had a soup kitchen in it. I'm an Oxford graduate. I've had 2 credentials from London School of Economics, but I actually was broken by a person and lost all confidence in myself. When I ended up in the last homeless shelter, I started to see the assets of the food being misused. The soup kitchen had no type of organizational structure, and a lot of food was going to waste. So I actually was able to find my voice because I knew what to do, and I trusted myself to be able to actually help. I sent out little bags. We collected shopping bags, the women in the shelter, not the men. And we went to a lot of different company, little cafes and beauty salons. And I wrote out a talk track and I said, here's what we're all going to say, because we all looked extremely dirty and very scary. And we just stood in front of those stores and said, we would like whatever you're going to throw away. If it's some food, if it's a sweater that someone left behind, whatever it is, could you just put it in this bag and we'll just leave it for you. You don't even have to touch us, just leave it for us. Well, ultimately, this actually became quite successful, and we were pulling in a tremendous amount of underutilized, assets of waste. And we were able to expand the food kitchen. I created an org chart. I put everybody to work. I found my voice again. I found my confidence. And then it was actually someone from the mayor's office heard about this, came down, looked at the structure, the org structure I had created, the budget I had created. And ultimately, I was able to get myself out of there and find my confidence. Before the pandemic, some people know this, some people don't, but before the pandemic, for the last 10 years, I live on the street as a homeless person 2 nights a week here in the Mission in a tent. It's my way. People on the street don't know that I'm anybody but one of them. It's my way of understanding the families and their needs on the street, which I am now able to, through other organizations, totally anonymously, I'm able to deliver what they need. Once again, and people say, I don't understand, why are you still, why do you live as a homeless person? And I say, because once you're a homeless person, you're always a homeless person. It's a mentality. And so if you talk to me about zero waste, I see it through a different lens. I see it through the lens of a homeless person. I see it through the lens of a venture capitalist. Waste is a person. Waste is a vehicle. Waste is a loaf of bread that's being thrown out. So I think differently. And in fact, a lot of the reason I work as hard as I do is because I actually invest into these organizations that help others, to give them a chance, as I found a way out. I know a lot of others can too.
Well, great. Well, another question from the audience is, take 100 homeless people. Your outcome was entrepreneurship. How did the other 99 turn out?
Yeah, so that's actually a really wonderful question. So when the mayor's office came down to the shelter, I was able to show them how to make people who had no pride, had not a pot, not a possession, but they had purpose. And if you give people purpose, you can actually educate them and you can actually provide a path forward. And so the mayor's office at that point and other organizations started to realize what we had and to start to provide paths for everybody at that shelter and other shelters. And I do this now to find ways to get people off the street. Sometimes it's really, to everyone listening, sometimes it's a bus ticket, sometimes it's a pair of glasses, it's a computer. I invested in a company called Samaritan that has these little beacons for us to be able to connect to the people on the street, the homeless, to understand and address exactly what they need to be able to provide them a path forward. So venture capital, being an entrepreneur is optimizing your potential. That's really what it is. We invest in all of you. We invest in the people first. It's rarely the products, because truthfully, everyone, and I talk about this all the time, when I was telling you about values, I invest in values, not valuations, because it's the people that actually are the ones that usually fail, not the products. So I look for people that stand for something. I look for people that have a mission and a company that can execute on that mission. I know I'm going off script here, but I think that we all have to look at the most underutilized asset that we have as being people. And in fact, a number of our companies, we have a company called Shift. Shift is a way to transition military service men and women out of the military and into jobs. Not until now has there been a way to translate their military skills. We've got over 300,000 people living the Department of the military branches every year. A small minority position in society has been to offer them jobs and find ways to translate their skills. This company now does that. There are, you look at, and I always say the most underutilized, highest quality and most diverse talent pool in the United States are people who have served in the military. So, and then if you wind that up with my work with homeless, over 30% of the people, of homeless people, are actually either veterans or vet families, which is a disgrace. So I have a theory about dot to dot, Hall. My life is dot to dot. So whatever I'm working in philanthropy, whatever I'm working in my fund, whatever my family is doing, whatever we're doing, my goal is to connect the dots to leverage whatever experiences and whatever education I can bring to the table.
Great. So our next question is, my son is managing director of Rocky Mountain Institute that is chartered to enticing businesses worldwide to be more eco-focused. I believe, Jillian, you may well have synergies between your organization and his. May I have your contact information to share with him? How would you reach out to him?
Of course. So I actually always say to please connect with me through LinkedIn and just give me a little background. I don't invest structured capital. We don't invest in what I would say the alternative or clean tech. We're not a clean tech fund. And so I'm just wondering if the Rocky Mountain Institute is more on the clean tech side, for which if it is, fantastic, and I love that, but this is not that would not be my area of expertise of investment. But if there is some reason that you would like me to talk to your son, or he would like to present something, I'm open. If in fact that I don't want to waste his time, because once again we're not a clean tech fund.
Great. So I'll share your LinkedIn profile with the audience. They can use that to connect with you on LinkedIn. So the next question is, how would a B enterprise do that? Went into homeless camps and found what it was that specific people required to exit. Specifically, how would they affect the homeless population size if they went in there and they started trying to find what we can do for each and every person?
Yeah, I mean, there are many companies that are doing this, and the B enterprises are definitely a good investment vehicle, a good fund, a good structure. Homelessness is an insidious and seemingly unmanaged space right now. Definitely here in San Francisco, but across the country. I think that the funds have been poorly managed and in fact abused. I went up to Sacramento and I spoke to them about how better they could deploy their funds, especially from the taxation here in California that built $1 billion fund for homelessness. I wish I had an answer, and I don't have an answer. There are many people working on this, and I would say people like like Samaritan, who really have a tangible way to connect to the needs of homelessness, of homeless people, and connect them to healthcare, other services. I've been working in this space for so long, and I wish I had an answer, a better answer to this. But I do know that there are many companies, like Life Moves is one of the largest networks for homeless network shelters. They have 29 programs over many years. And so I do believe that they have some data, and they definitely have programs that we could invest into.
Great. The next comment is, I think what we're working on with my pre-seed research idea, velourultra, is a superb fit for your core value mission. We're a minority brand with no presence in the very niche, highly exclusive industry of the reimagined, uncanny, custom-built to order hypercar. I will reach out to you for sure. So look like we'll have some more information for you there as well to go forward. The zero waste economy, there's just a lot of different applications and sectors in there. If you had to pick one or two that you think are really good opportunities to pursue today, what would you put at the top of the list?
People, skills. We have as you know, we have a tremendous deficit here of talent. Here in the United States, we have 8 million jobs that need to be filled. And I think that we need to invest more into upskilling and reskilling. I think people are the most underutilized asset. And so if I could find companies that, and we have a number of them, corporations as a whole need to better understand and assess the skills of their present workforces, then be able to analyze the gaps and then be able to educate to that. I know I don't want to absolutely upset everybody on this call, but years ago I spent some time in Wuhan, way before COVID. Let's get that straight. Spent some time with the mayor of Wuhan and found that it was a fascinating model that they had created, whereby they were partnering up with something like 80 universities in Wuhan in order to create these micro credits for upskilling in their workforce. In the auto manufacturing sector, which represents, so Wuhan is the third largest manufacturer of cars, interestingly enough. So they have this, they saw these gaps, and I gave the mayor a lot of credit because they really started to think more around how to create these micro credentials with universities with their present workforces to upskill and reskill. And I think that's more of what our country actually needs to do, but definitely companies.
Great. Next question is, what are the barriers that prevent the labor market clearing?
Yeah. I don't have a good answer. I wish I've heard a lot of people speak on this topic, and I'm not quite sure we even have a full grasp of it as well. I think some of it obviously is political. Much of it is political. But I don't want to create I don't want this to be a political conversation. I think that both parties can do a better job of breaking down those barriers, of incentivizing labor in a more productive way rather than a coddling way, I would say. Yeah.
So as we come out of COVID and we go through this great resignation, I think 1 out of 4 is now leaving a job to go find a better one. How much of that is driven by, zero waste thinking? I really don't want to waste my skills. I can do better. I can find better, and they're doing forward. And how much do you think that's impacting that movement there?
Yeah. Well, these are wonderful questions, and I really appreciate the thought that you put into them, because I think that there's psychologically, obviously, people have come out of COVID with with a recalibration of their value, of their self-worth. And I think that this is part and parcel of all this. What is the worth? What are they worth? What's their time worth? How better can they serve themselves, their family, their communities? I don't think it's all about how, and I hear a lot of this, how people don't want to work. I think people want to work in something that's fulfilling. I think people want to work on a mission. I think people want to be able to monetize and reach their potential with potential that they see, not just what other people want them to do. And so I think that psychologically, this whole country has gone through therapy, like self-therapy. That's how I see COVID. I think everybody's reassessed. You know, I always say, and for all the women that are watching and all the men are probably going to roll their eyes, but as a woman, it's a very difficult to calculate your self-worth. This is one of our biggest challenges. We are first calculate our self-worth usually by the fathers or some man in our family, then our boyfriends, then our male bosses, and then our husbands, and you keep going on and on from that. And so for decades, women have struggled with how to calculate and understand their own self-worth. I think the pandemic has actually pushed it now to both genders, where each one of us are thinking to ourselves, what is our self-worth? How are we going to use our time and our potential? How do we optimize that? And so I think there's just going to be a lot of moving pieces for quite some time until we can get through this therapy bubble that we're in, this self-assessment. And I think companies also have to provide better paths forward and understand our state of minds as well. We have a company called Hurdle that I actually found during the pandemic. It was right after George Floyd was murdered. And I felt completely helpless, and I felt completely shameful that I did not and had not done enough to better understand the Black man and women's position and challenges in society. You know, I always thought my heart was open, but I really didn't think my eyes were opened enough. So I called everyone in my network and said, help me. How can I help you better? Because I have not done a good enough job. I connected with the mayor's office in Washington, D.C., and they were telling me about this small pilot they were trying to find the money for mental health for Black men and women. And I said, I told them to ask. I started to ask more about it. They put me in touch with Kevin Dedner. And it was a small company, and they were really trying to figure out how to build it, it was, you know, he was really having some challenges. So I said, you know what, Kevin, I'm going to put some money in. I'm going to pull together some advisors for you, from tech advisor, branding. We're going to put together a go-to-market strategy. I'm going to rebrand your company and help you do that. At the time it was called Henry Health. So we rebranded it. I got a top branding team from Goodby Silverstein for free. And we all leaned into this company. And now this company is called Hurdle. It just got its first big contract from John Hancock. It is a thriving company delivering mental health to minority population. And I cannot be more proud of that. But that was, once again, he had the potential and we just needed to invest in it. And I think that mental health, and all of us are just going through, as I said, sort of, this is a massive group therapy. This nation is going through massive group therapy.
Great. So our next question switches gears a little bit. Branding. How does a startup brand itself differently now than it would have, say, 20 years ago?
Big question. I teach this, actually. I teach branding. And in fact, one of the companies that I sold was a brand communication company. I sold to Saatchi & Saatchi. There are two problems. The brand narrative of a company and the brand point of view has to be stood up at the very beginning of a company. 20 years ago, it was like a afterthought, right? It was, oh, I think we have to get the brand right, especially for tech companies. And now and we put our companies, most of them, through something called Brand Camp, where we created a 48-hour hackathon to drive them to their brand narrative, the point of view, their mission manifesto. We need companies to understand how to say it, because if you can't say it, you can't sell it. And I say this all the time. 20 years ago, you didn't have the real understanding of how a brand was a platform of trust for a consumer. 20 years ago, you didn't have Steve Jobs and others saying that they didn't want someone to buy their products. They wanted someone to own their products. And in order to own a product, it's a different mindset. You have to go and you have to create a brand identity. And you have to do it at the beginning. And it has to do a lot with creating obviously the visibility, but also as important, right, the visibility and the trust. So how do you go about doing that? And there are definitely steps. You have to have a large organizing idea for which everything is tucked under in terms of messaging. There are many steps to branding, and it is now a business. It is as a necessity, and the brand for us has to be baked in from the very beginning, unlike 20 years ago.
Great. So I deal with a lot of impact startups in the impact investing world. And it seems like every year, a larger or greater percentage of the startups are in the impact world. And someone made the comment, in 5 years, they will all be impact companies. They will not let you be just a profit generating machine. You must have an impact. Do you agree with that statement or disagree with it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So this goes back to something that I said before, is that consumers, employees, everyone is demanding a mission. Everyone is demanding, right? It is no longer, I mean, we all know that I opt to buy from a company that has a sustainability mission. I opt for companies that do things the right way, that invest in their values, invest in their mission. Whether it's, translating military skills and optimizing those who have served our country, to reducing wastewater, to creating digital health platform to serve a mental health platform to serve the underserved, I would say, population, the minority populations. Impact is any way that you can deliver something to society of goodness, of kindness, of need, of some way to better restructure a society so that it serves everyone equally. And I think that impact, that word has been so overused. Mm-hmm. Because what does impact investing mean? Everybody can say, somehow can pull a little piece out of their company and say, well, we're impacting this. Some people will say, gee, just by having a company, if we're an impact company, because we're having impact because we're putting people to work. So would I like to see every company mission driven? Would I like to have every company deliver to society, not just to shareholders? Is that what we're talking about, impact? I think that I feel slightly, I will push back, I'll say a little bit on always putting the word impact on a fund, on a company, because I think that at some point it becomes disingenuous. And when you have to stand up your company as an impact company, you should just be doing that anyway. That should be part and parcel of why you are building a company, to elevate society, not just here, but potentially abroad as well.
So is impact in the cost of capital?
Yeah, that's interesting. It can be, right? It can be, for sure. Once again, I'm always very tentative when a company comes to us and says they're an impact company, or we could have easily called our fund structure capital an impact fund, but we didn't, because that is part and parcel of our DNA. We want to have companies that are not just transformational for society, but foundational for society, where it actually affects every single aspect of society in a positive way. So yeah, there is a cost of capital for sure. Should there be? I don't know.
It seems like that's the direction it's going. I've heard of groups that said they're trying to standardize what is the value of impact in a financial sense. If you meet your impact numbers, well, your interest rate will be 2% cheaper. You miss your numbers, it'll be 2% higher.
Yeah.
And then the question comes up, is 2% the right number for this? And so
yeah, and how do you calibrate that? How do you calibrate, right?
That's the hard part.
The impact, right? Shouldn't everyone be having impact? Can't everyone have impact? So it really, I wouldn't say a slippery slope, but it definitely begs for many other additional questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Yeah. Okay. I think that I'd like to see, we have now more entrepreneurs in the United States than ever before. A lot of people have left their job, right, to stand up a business. And the one thing that I just want to mention is that a lot of people come to us about getting venture funding, and there are many other types of funding. If you don't see your business as being $1 billion or $5 billion business, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not a business. If you're actually working and building a company that's going to help your community and put food in your family's mouth and then some, and add some generational wealth, that's a good company too. Be careful when you think about venture capital as being your only source or your priority source of funding. I know that's all coming from venture capitalists, but I do have a sheet, a document which outlines alternative funding vehicles, which I really do think is important for everyone to better understand that there are government agencies. There are many, many different sources of funding that not necessarily are venture capitalists. And sometimes VCs should not be even brought into the equation at all, and sometimes much later, because having a venture capitalist in your company will be in many ways incredibly instrumental, because we bring our networks, and certainly we have a bigger well to dip into for follow-ons. But once again, we're not always the best source of funding.
Absolutely. So there's many other alternative forms of funding out there for these groups as well. And yes, we have other sessions that we can go into details on that as well. Yes. Anybody in the audience have any final questions? If you'd like to go and put them in, glad to answer those. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up here in just a moment. I want to thank you, Jillian, for joining us today and for sharing your wisdom and your perspective on these topics as well. And appreciate your taking time.
No, it's always my pleasure, Hall, and I really appreciate, as I said before, all the effort that you make in order bringing this education, because that's the most important thing. If we can empower people, they'll have the confidence to stand up better companies and do it with integrity. And I appreciate that you have that integrity. So for everyone, if you want to reach out to me in LinkedIn, I'm okay with that. And I would just like to ask everyone, if there is one nugget of knowledge that you were able to glean from this talk, pop it in the LinkedIn, because I always I speak all over the world, and I want to feel and what really resonates, better understand what resonates with everyone at this time as opposed to last year, the year before that, so I can better myself. But thank you again, everyone, for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts. And once again, they're just opinions, right? My philosophy on that is, if you hear something once, that's opinion. Hear it twice, that's still an opinion. If you hear the same thing from 3 sources, that's a consensus, and then you should start to act on it.
Well, that's good advice, and want to thank you for sharing that and all the other great advice you gave us here today as well. Appreciate the work that you're doing out there. And with that, we'll go ahead and close it for now, and looking forward to having a follow-up again with you soon.
It would be my pleasure, sir. Take care. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Reach your potential. That's all I'm saying. Thanks again. Cheers.